Blessings and peace, beloved. Thank you for joining us once again for our Great Controversy Devotional series, where we are using the book Christ Triumphant that deals with the issues pertaining to this great struggle between Christ and Satan. The devotional thought for today, June the 8th, is entitled Learning to Lead Through Serving. And the scripture reading is 1 Kings chapters 19 and verse 16. Elisha, the son of Shaphat of Abel-Meholah, shalt thou anoint to be prophet in thy room. We would do well to consider the case of Elisha when he was chosen for his work. Elisha was of a family who had kept the ancient true faith of Israel. He did not live in the thickly populated cities. His father was a tiller of the soil, a farmer. Even during the captivity, there were souls who had not degenerated and gone into apostasy. And this family was included in the 7,000 who had not bowed the knee to Baal. So we discovered that Elijah was not the only one, and now we are seeing a living example, a living representation, a living testimony of those who did not bow their knees to Baal. And Elisha's family was one of those thousands, was involved in that 7,000 who did not bow their knees to Baal. Elijah was about to close his earthly labors, and that tells us something, beloved, that God is counting on you. God is counting on your family to not bow your knees to Baal. God is counting on your family to hold up high the torch of truth because of their faithfulness. And they did not know this. They could not understand this or comprehend this. Because of their faithfulness, because of Elisha's faithfulness, because of his father's and his father's household faithfulness, because he kept himself pure and unspotted from the world in a time of apostasy, God was able to inform Elijah that a suitable replacement for his ministry was going to be found in the family, or in the household of a family that did not bow their knees to Baal. So there is always a reward for righteousness. Never feel as though being righteous and standing up for truth is an exercise in futility. And so now God is setting us yet another example that he always leaves, he always gives direction. He never leaves us without a witness, and he never leaves himself without a witness. So when we examine the ministry of the prophets, though many of them never saw each other face to face, in their ministries would pick up where the other would leave off, beloved. And so there is this unity in the ministry of the prophets. There was not no competition, but it was that spirit of unity, because it was the Spirit of God that was actuating all of them into holy service and to be vessels fit that God himself could speak through. And so therefore God does not leave his people without a witness for the truth. So one prophet takes the baton from another prophet in the execution of their ministry, in their duties, and in their calling, and continues to bear that torch of truth forward into time, even coming down to in these last days. God caused a reformation, a revival to take place. And in the midst of this revival, this great second Advent movement and awakening, beloved, we see that at the same time, people all over the world, they knew it was not only William Miller, that something was happening and of prophetic significance. For the year 1844, men like Joseph Wolfe took it upon themselves, in obedience to the call of God, to the convicting power of the Spirit of God, to spread the message of the second coming of Jesus Christ. And in the midst, or on the heels of this Advent movement, this great second Advent awakening, God now calls Ellen G. White into the prophetic office to be a messenger of the Lord to give messages of truth to guide the remnant church through the uncertain times of the future, leading to the certainty of the manifestation of Christ in the clouds of heaven in these last days. And so her ministry is on the heels of the massive working of the Spirit of God in our modern generation. Elijah was about to close his earthly labors. Another was to be chosen to carry forward the work to be done for that time. In his course of travel, Elijah was directed northward. Now, everything seems to be springing up as if to redeem the time of famine and dearth. The plenteous rains had done more for the earth than for the hearts of humanity. It was better prepared for labor than were the hearts of apostate Israel. Wherever Elijah looked, the land he saw was owned by one man, a man who had not bowed the knee to Baal, whose heart had remained undivided in the service of God. The owner of this land was Shaphat. Busy activity was seen among the husbandry. While the flocks were enjoying the green pastures, the busy hands of his servants were sowing the seed for a harvest. The attention of Elijah was attracted to Elisha, the son of Shaphat. Far from city and court dissipation, Elisha had received his education. He had been trained in habits of simplicity, of obedience to his parents and to God. And this shows that as long as you maintain your consecration to God and you learn the lessons that God is teaching you, you may be dwelling in obscurity in some remote part of the earth. If God has a special task to fulfill and he realizes that you are the man for that job because you have made your calling and election sure by obediently following his commands and by faithfully executing his will in your service to him and in accepting the teaching points that he brings in your pathway to learn his lessons, God will find you living in your remote location. Wherever you are, God will send some person to come and seek you out and find you, and God is going to put his hand upon you and anoint you for service, beloved. So don't fear. Don't fear that you are not going to be discovered. Don't fear that your usefulness will become uselessness because there's nowhere for you to exercise the skills and the qualifications that God has granted to you and that you have learned and have honed by the faithful exercise and use thereof. God will find you. So once you are faithful, God finds you. Elisha did not go out looking for the prophetic office, but because of his simplicity of life in learning the lessons of God, God found him. God sent someone to search him out. And God is sending someone today, beloved, to search you out in your faithfulness. So don't feel neglected and don't feel left out. Don't feel as though the world is going long and leave you. No, beloved, you don't worry about that. You should be concerned in executing your tasks faithfully and learning the lessons that God teaches you, because once you learn the lessons, God comes for you. He finds you and he says, well done, my good and faithful servant. You are faithful in little, you shall also be faithful in much. He had been trained in habits of simplicity, of obedience to his parents and to God. But though of a meek and quiet spirit, Elisha had no changeable character. He was steadfast, he was firm, he was resolute, he was faithful. Integrity and fidelity and the love and fear of God were his. He had the characteristics of a ruler, but with it all was the meekness of one who would serve. His mind had been exercised to be faithful in the little things, to be faithful in whatever he should do, so that if God should call him to act more directly for him, he would be prepared to hear his voice. So Elisha was a man of opportunity. Elisha was not hoping and wishing for better to come and sitting in idle expectancy, waiting for it to happen. Elisha was learning from Christ And Elisha was executing whatever he had to do in his daily life as faithfully as he could to the best of his ability. This is what Elisha was doing, beloved. He was faithful in whatever he should do, so that if God should call him to act more directly for him, he would be prepared to hear his voice, because now his attitude is an attitude of completion. His attitude is an attitude of perfection. His attitude is an attitude of wholeness. His attitude is an attitude of obedience. This is what his attitude was. So because of his attitude, because of his faithful habits, God recognized in him the principles that are necessary for him to be used effectively in his service. His surroundings at home were those of wealth, but he realized that in order to obtain an all-round education, he must be a constant worker in any line of work that needed to be done. God is making us well-rounded, beloved. God is refining our skills. God is refining our mind. God is refining our eyesight. God is refining our taste buds. God is refining our feelings. God is refining our gifts and our talents to make us all-rounders, to make us well-rounded individuals. Because God cannot afford for us to be biased. God cannot afford for us to be prejudiced. God cannot afford for us to be narrow-minded and limited, because when we are narrow-minded and limited in mentality, in thinking, in attitude, in mindset, that means there is going to be a narrow scope with which we can work in, and therefore we are limiting the Holy One of Israel. His surroundings at home were those of wealth, but he realized that in order to obtain an all-round education, he must be a constant worker in any line of work that needed to be done. He would not consent to be in any respect less informed than his father's servants. So he knew he had to know how to perform every task that was connected with him running the family farm. He would learn how to serve first, that he might know how to lead and instruct and command. You cannot be a leader if you were not first a servant. And Elisha understood this principle, that he could not be a good leader unless he was a good learner, unless he was a good servant. While doing all that he possibly could do with his God-entrusted capabilities in cooperating with his father in the home firm, he was doing God's service. So God recognized that he was doing him a faithful service in the simple duties of life at home, and therefore God called him to prophetic office because he was faithful in the little and insignificant things. And if he was faithful in the little and insignificant things, he will be faithful in the things that are great and are of significance. So God looks at the track record of our lives. God looks at how we sweep our house. God looks at how we mop our floors. God looks at how we cook our food. God looks at how we do the dishes. God looks at how we wash our cars. God looks at how we fold our clothes. God looks at how we arrange the matters in our life. God looks at how we run our households, beloved. Yes. You can't tell me no. Yes, this is what God does. This is not an assumption. This is a fact. God looks at how we live. God looks at how we manage our lives. Do we manage the affairs of our lives and the functionings of our household in neatness, in regularity, and in order? Are we faithful or are we unfaithful? Do we slip? Because when you have a habit of slipping in little things, you are now planting a seed to slip in the great things. But when you cultivate an attitude of learning, you recognize that you are a lifelong learner in the school of Christ, in this school of life. So when you have the attitude, so God judges us from our attitude. This is it. And so this is how God looks at us before he calls us up to higher service. Or were you thinking it was simply because of academic qualification or intellectual qualifications? No, beloved. That's just a limited aspect. because we are not simply intellectual people. We are not just a mind. We are minds that live in a body. We are not just spiritual creatures. We are flesh and blood, living in a tangible world. So everything that is connected with our reality must be brought in a state of wholeness and balance. These things are for the refining of our character. And in these little things, God teaches us the lesson. But when we get high and mighty, we miss the lessons. And when we miss the lessons, we miss the opportunity for a greater calling in our lives. And when we miss the opportunity for a greater calling in our lives, we lessen our chances to be overcomers. And beloved, God wants us to be overcomers. And we can only overcome by being learners in the school of Christ. Blessings and peace.
Thank you for watching. We really appreciate it. Don't forget to like and share this video. Also remember to subscribe and smash that notification bell so you don't miss out on any upcoming video. Also, you can support us at wordoflife.network/donate, or you can email us for any information on messengersofthecovenant@gmail.com. Thank you for watching. Thank you for your time. God bless you. Blessings and peace.